This is the Ryen Russillo Podcast, presented by FanDuel.
That was an incredible week 4 for a bunch of different reasons, but that closing window, and let's face it, for the most part, unless it's your team, a lot of us are watching teams that we're not all that emotionally aligned with, but just to see how the first window was closing with 4 or 5 games, that's just a reminder how great the product can be, because I know there's other times where I'll be like, man, we can have an awful Monday nighter and everybody watches it. Terrible calls, stuff we don't understand. And then you're like, man, that was great. This wasn't really that. I mean, of course, there's going to be mistakes throughout all the games, and that's not really what I want to focus on. The positive part of it is that you're sitting there on a Sunday afternoon watching all those games come down to the wire. You have no idea what's going on. You got bets everywhere. And that was just one of those moments where you feel like you haven't taken a breath in the last hour. So shout out to the NFL, which doesn't need me to promote it beyond where it's at. But I want to run through a bunch of different things. And of course, I'm going to start with a headline, and that is Tom back in New England. Now, this was a big deal. I don't know historically if it'll end up being as big as it the lead up. I mean, almost nothing with that kind of lead up. You're like, is this an accurate amount of attention? But you know what? Overdo it. It's way better to overdo it than underdo it when you're talking about promoting and building up something like this. I mean, you can't send enough media people to cover this stuff. And I think there were like over 500 credentials for it. As far as the Boston part of it, which I think I can speak well to, the idea that most Pats fans are rooting for Brady, that's definitely not the case. There was a poll, I think it was the Boston Globe, there might have been another poll too, where 83% of Pats fans are rooting for a team to win. Actually, that might seem lower than what I would think it would be. And I know NBC was doing some stuff where they were kind of like polling people throughout, where they basically, it felt a little bit like, hey, person from Boston, can you say the dumbest run of sentences possible? Can you say something that makes you look like you're not even allowed to have a blender at your house? Can you say that about this game? And, look, NBC got what they wanted. So the build up and all of it, I know at times you get to a point and you're like, all right, just play the game. I mean, but this is exactly what we're looking at. The other part of this that I thought was kind of funny was the predetermined Kraft video where Robert Kraft was going to definitely hug Brady before the game, because if there's one thing Kraft doesn't want people to think of him, he doesn't want anyone to think that he had anything to do with Tom leaving. And when Tom left Tampa, he even made a statement about the whole thing, which is those two guys getting together and basically like, save me here. Make sure everyone in Boston knows that I'm not the main reason that you're not here anymore. And so that video, and it was almost like, hey, Drew Brees, we get it, but can you get out of the way? I made sure that all this stuff was going to happen ahead of time. The game itself, it wasn't pretty. It's just that it was full of drama, because you're like, wait, is New England going to pull this thing off? Brady wasn't great. I don't know if it was the rain. I know they said it had nothing to do with it. It was definitely part of it. And it felt like, throughout as you're watching the broadcast, I think Collinsworth's really good in that kind of stuff. Being like, hey, look at how these defensive players along the line are floating around. You don't know who's staying in. You don't know who's coming. You don't know who's dropping back. You can't live blitzing Brady the entire time, but you can't never blitz him either. So when you think of, Gronk not being there, Godwin didn't seem like he was even somebody they were even looking at. Mike Evans is only going to get a couple catches here. Then we'll get to Antonio Brown a little bit later. But Brady was a little off, but they were moving the ball better than New England was. New England on the other side is they're looking like, okay, we're just waiting for Brady to open this thing up. It's going to be 21-3. It didn't happen. And Mac Jones, 19 straight completions. And yes, look, they don't throw the ball deep with Mac Jones. I've been like with a lot of rookie quarterbacks. Yeah, there's some stuff I like. There's some stuff I'm not sure is as good as people are making it out to be. It's almost like when you're a rookie or you're Mac Jones, you're not the number 1 pick and you're middle of first round pick. It's just anything where it doesn't look like you're throwing up in your shirt is a win. But I thought Mac Jones last night showed more throughout this season than at any other point. Like something we were going, hey, his confidence, his composure. There were some throws there a little bit later, and they're all short throws. I mean, they had 83% of their throws go 10 yards or less down the field, which is the highest of any team in any game so far this season. That's a huge number. 83% of the passes 10 yards or less from Mac, and that's what this offense is right now. And Damian Harris, who got off to a really good start, nice running back. But the offensive lines had some more issues. And, again, it's not like Mac's throwing to anybody on the outside consistently. But I think overall, some of the things that you hope that are there to build on for somebody who maybe can be your franchise guy the next however many years, I thought there's some really positive signs there for Mac Jones. But then you're thinking, wait, is New England actually going to pull this thing off? Brady gets the football back, and we can kind of get into what Tampa was doing and attacking, because they went to Antonio Brown twice where you thought, well, they probably want to run a little bit more clock. I am in the minority on this one. I think we prioritize clock more than plays. I would rather prioritize which plays you think work over clock. And it's like a guy in basketball having a decent shot at 6 seconds and going, no, I got to run it down and make sure no one can get off an offensive rebound so there's no time left on the clock. Like, we all like to think we're Larry Bird in our lives. We're not. And I actually like what Tampa did. And, John Jones at corner came out. They hit a completion against his backup. Jones came back in. Brady thought he was hobbled. He had an amazing pass in the right end of the end zone for Antonio Brown. Brown just lost it. It was actually a perfect throw. And then on the next one, they went for it again, and Brown dropped it. And again, it was going to be a really great catch, but it's Antonio Brown. So I understood what they were doing because they were trying to just get the touchdown because they figured, hey, Matt can move the ball between the 20s, but we don't really like him. We're not that afraid of him once we get down into the red zone, even though he had a great play action on that 1-yard touchdown play on that big drive. So I got what Tampa was doing. So then New England comes back, and I just knew it. I mean, Nick Folk putting up the graphic that he's made all of these field goals in a row. It's like, well, he's definitely going to miss one now, and in the conditions. And the funny thing is, too, is that when he clanks it off the left upright, the graphic was like, it would have been good from 56. We're like, he hit it from 56. He hit it from 56, but he hit the upright. And the other part of that, too, was that, Brady was going to get the ball back with 52 seconds left and 2 timeouts after that kick either way. So I guess there's an argument, too, that New England could have gone for it on 4th down. If they didn't like their chances with the kick, but they made their decision and they moved on from it. So let's look at some Bill Tom stuff, because I haven't done the Bill Tom Brady legacy rankings because I just felt like I needed a little bit more data on the whole thing. And I know the easiest thing at one point I thought, is Tom going to lose this one because he knows Bill needs it right now? Bill needs it a little bit more. Is that how selfless Tom Brady is? Perhaps. But that was not the case because he ended up getting the win. Did he keep it close so people respect Bill a little bit more? Again, I'm not ready to go there yet. But if you think about this, the Pats get rid of Antonio Brown. Yes, he wins the Super Bowl with Brady, but then he can't pull in the 2 touchdown catches. Did Belichick know that was going to happen 2 years ago? Can't rule it out. Don't know for certain, but can't rule it out. The hug afterwards, it was brief. It was a bit like, yeah, I know I have to say hi to you, but I'm actually talking to somebody else right now, which is true with Bill's case. And I know Brady has the Super Bowl, but think about this. There was a secret meeting afterwards where Belichick met up with Brady, and they spent 23 minutes together, 23 the GOAT, and talked it out. They want to do it away from the cameras. Was Bill doing that knowing he could pick Brady's brain if they meet in the Super Bowl? Again, I'm just thinking out loud, but it just felt like Bill one step ahead no matter what. So legacy rankings right now, we have Belichick 1, Tom Brady 2. Let's talk about my favorite football team. That's the Arizona Cardinals, 4-0. They were 0-4 against Sean McVay, and they put it on the Rams yesterday. This Arizona team is now top 5 in offense, top 5 in defense. They beat the Titans. They beat Minnesota. We're going to do a little bit of the Is It the Schedule Stupid, which is one of my favorite segments that I do. And with their case, like, look, yeah, you can get on Minnesota. We don't really know what to do with them. That was a weird game against Cleveland, by the way. Minnesota goes right down the field. They look crisp. It's perfect. And then the rest of the game, I don't know what their average third down in distance was, but every time I looked up, it was like double-digit yardage. So that's not all on Kirk. The offensive line could not beat Cleveland. They even had a play where it was like one of those last kind of desperation pass plays, and Cleveland got pressure with 3, which almost never happens. Like, I always kind of hate that when you drop 8 and you send 3, and you're like, all right, normally like the 3 are never going to do anything. The guy back there is going to have a ton of time. And in this case, Cousins didn't. So I'm not actually piling on Cousins in that game because it was just such a weird game. And there's another thing going on with Baker too. We saw it in that Chiefs game where it's like, hey, we need a long possession from you to run some clock and maybe get up a second score or just a field goal. And Cleveland wasn't able to do any of that stuff. And on a 3rd and 5, Baker missed Odell on what would have been a touchdown. So that's something to pay attention to there. It's not like bashing Baker, but it's just, hey, if you're going to be one of these franchise guys and the money that he's about to make, they're going to need you to be a little bit better in some of those later possessions. And I need to dig into some of the fourth quarter stuff in some of those closer games. We saw it against Kansas City. We saw it in Minnesota. However, back to my favorite team, like I said, with Arizona. When you look at the schedule and who they beat, we don't really know what to make of the Titans as they lose to the Jets. The Titans have just not been the same team. Tannehill hasn't been the same. Minnesota could have a really good record prior to that Cleveland game with all of the bad luck that they've had. And then they beat the Jags. But beating up on a Rams team that is clearly in the conversation as NFC Super Bowl contenders, like this is just another level. And Kyler's the MVP of the league at this point. He's first in completion percentage, and it's not like everybody else. He's 76% of his passes right now. He's got a couple more picks than you would want. He's third in QBR. But I think what he means to his team, and when I look at so many of these other younger guys, whenever we're seeing all this fourth down conversion stuff, which at times, it's not about what the conversion rate is. It's about who you are, how the game's playing out, what are your matchups, are you going to get the ball back with good field position on this fourth down attempt? And we're seeing fourth down attempts everywhere. So I think it's obviously better because you just ask the defense, like, would you rather than punt or go for it on fourth or short? And every defensive player is normally like, we're always thrilled when you punt it, so why are you punting it? But we also have to admit, with the evolution of the quarterback position, where we're finally putting the best athletes here on Sundays, is you just have more options on fourth down. Like, think of the guys, if you're my age, that you grew up with. There were no zone reads, okay? You wouldn't do it because your guy was going to get killed and he wasn't going to turn the corner anyway on a keeper, even if the defensive end crashed down a little bit. These guys just weren't quick enough. So the fact that we have quarterbacks now that are this athletic, guys like Kyler, guys like Lamar, not going for it on fourth down is actually limiting your offense. So I think that's a big part of why we're seeing this. It's not just the math, it's also the players. But when I look at some other guys that kind of scramble out with no purpose, what I love about Kyler is that when he moves out of the pocket, whether it's pressure or by design, he is moving with purpose and then sets himself again. I mean, he can make every single throw on the run, doesn't have to have any, I always point this out whenever we're looking at guys' form and what their mechanics are. It's like, hey, that's cool, it looks good, but you don't get the chance to just drop back and throw freely throughout an entire Sunday afternoon. It just doesn't really happen. It's not realistic. So it's really, how are you with those challenge throws? How are you in chaos? And Murray deals with chaos in a way where then he resets himself where it looks like he's not dealing with chaos. It's so impressive. Like I said, I think he's the MVP of the league. All right, let's go to It's the Schedule Stupid, because we're a month in. Some teams have better records. Some teams have worse records than what we expected going back to August. And there are times where you can get a little caught up. One of my favorite baseball games ever is like when a team wins their first two series and they're supposed to stink and they're 4-2 and 5-1. And we're like, hey, what's different about this team? And then we check back in September and they have 58 wins. It's not as dramatic with this, but it does happen in college. It happens in the NFL. And you look at Carolina coming up against Dallas. They're 3-0. They had the number one defense in the NFL in a lot of categories, and two that I look at is opponents' yards per play. They were number one, and they were number one in defensive DVOA. So, and it was by a wide margin. So now you're looking at Dallas going, okay, look, no one's scared of Carolina, but look how great this defense is. But it really was about the schedule. They played the Jets, they played the Saints, who nobody likes anymore, and the Texans, who are just falling apart after looking somewhat competitive at the beginning of the season. So I think the Carolina story right now is a nice story, but the defensive numbers massively skewed. And Dallas, who, whether it's them winning the division or some of these defensive rookies that have changed the way we think about their defense, I like Dallas. I like them a lot. We know how I feel about Dak. So them putting it on Carolina, you could say, wow, they did that to the number one defense. Not really. They did it to the number one defense statistically that was bumped up by their opponents. The same thing I think it happened with Denver, even though I really like Denver's defense. I definitely like Denver's defense better than Carolina. But that Dallas left no questions about it, and their defensive youngsters keep making plays is a great sign. Shout out to the rookie QBs. 1-11 in starts going into week 4. Wilson gets a win. Zach Wilson, who early pick, you're like, well, what's going on here? And the Jets pull it out against the Titans. And then you got Justin Fields with the Bears, who that is such a strange dynamic. I know I've kind of had some fun, and I'll admit, push back on what if Nagy was right that Fields isn't ready? Because as bad as 2 weeks ago, and it was all time, it was second worst offensive production we've seen from an NFL team in 40 years in that previous Bears game with Fields' first start. Averaged, 1.1 yards per play. They ran the football against a not great Detroit team, but the energy they had, the Montgomery injury sucks, but the energy they had, they ran the football more. They didn't ask Fields to do a ton. Bill Lazor called plays, and then afterwards, Nagy's like, yeah, whatever. Everything still runs through me. And you're like, what do you, why can't you just, usually guys like to give other people credit, even when they don't believe it. That's one of my pet peeves with coaches where, we're like, oh, we lost 21-20. Yeah, we were out-coached thoroughly. They prep better and all this stuff. And you're like, do you really believe that? Nagy actually believes that everything good is still because of him. When I don't know. This isn't like a guy that's won at other places. I mean, hell, at least John Fox was successful somewhere else. So Wilson gets a win. Fields gets a win. Mac Jones almost gets a win. Two final things here. I might be right, might be wrong. I feel bad for Steelers fans. You're going to have to watch this all year long. And I know what Roethlisberger means to your franchise. And it's not like I want to sit here, but this is now, right? This is 2021. This is what we're doing. We're evaluating every Sunday. In the beginning of the year, even that first game against Buffalo, I'm like, how is Pittsburgh going to survive with this kind of offensive attack? Roethlisberger now has thrown 52 passes on 3rd and 4th down this season, 24 of them. So that's 46% of those passes have been short of the sticks. He threw a 4th and 5 short of the sticks yesterday. This game is now short of the sticks. Everybody is doing it. And so Ben is not alone. There's some other people around him. Shout out to Hembo from ESPN, the researcher who tweeted that one out. Najee Harris had 14 catches in week 3. I love Najee Harris. That's probably a bad sign when your running back has 14 catches in a game. That was week 3 against Vegas. Could be wrong. Are you ready for this? Daniel Jones, Giants quarterback? After week 1, I go, okay, they're going to be replacing this guy again. And at one point, I thought Josh Allen was a guy who would be replaced at some point, and that is not the case. So I was wrong about that early on, and I'm not ready to say I'm totally wrong about Daniel Jones, but he is better now. He is better. The numbers this year compared to the other 2 years, it's you look at him and you go, okay, this is better. The Washington game, that game, I was like, man, he's doing a couple things in here. We know he has the big arm. We know how athletic he is. But we also know how much he turned the football over, where there were picks, the 30 fumbles in his first 28 career games. He's had 1 pick this season. It was in the first game. He's been clean the last 3, only 1 lost fumble. So I could be wrong about Daniel Jones, which I didn't think I'd be saying a month into the season.